Margaret, you're being ridiculous. Nobody needs a brand new car at 73. My daughter Sandra's voice cut through the phone like ice, each word dripping with condescension. I was standing in the showroom of Henderson Luxury Motors, admiring a gorgeous pearl-white Mercedes sedan, when she delivered this judgment. The salesman, a polite young man named Trevor, stepped away to give me privacy, but I could see the confusion in his eyes. Here I was, a well-dressed woman with perfect credit, being scolded like a child for wanting to purchase a vehicle with my own money. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Sandra, I've been driving that old Honda for 12 years. It's time for something nice, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the familiar knot forming in my stomach. Mom, you're starting to make some very questionable decisions. First the cruise, then that expensive jewelry, now this. We're worried about you. We. Always we. As if my 3 children had formed some kind of tribunal to monitor my every move. As if the woman who had raised them, built a successful interior design business, and accumulated a 7-figure estate through decades of hard work and smart investments, had suddenly become incompetent the moment she hit 70. My name is Margaret Sullivan, and at 73, I thought I had earned the right to live my life without a committee. I thought wrong. It started small, as these things always do. Little comments here and there, concerned glances exchanged between my children when they thought I wasn't looking. The first real incident happened 6 months ago when I decided to take a Mediterranean cruise. Not some bargain basement trip, but a proper luxury liner with a balcony suite and all the amenities. I had worked 70-hour weeks for 30 years, building Sullivan Interiors into the most sought-after design firm in our city. I had earned that cruise. But when I mentioned it at our monthly family dinner, the reaction was swift and sharp. A cruise? By yourself? My son David nearly choked on his wine. Mom, that's not safe. You don't know anyone on those ships. That's rather the point, I replied, cutting into my roast beef with perhaps more force than necessary. Meeting new people, seeing new places. My youngest daughter, Patricia, leaned forward with that sympathetic smile I was beginning to loathe. Mom, we just think it might be better if you stayed closer to home. What if something happens? What if you get confused in a foreign port? Confused. The word hung in the air like smoke from a snuffed candle. This from the daughter I had personally tutored through calculus, whose college tuition I had paid in full, whose wedding I had funded when her father-in-law backed out of his financial promises. I have traveled extensively throughout my life, I said evenly. I somehow managed to navigate business trips to New York, Los Angeles, and even Paris without becoming confused. Sandra, ever the eldest and most presumptuous, reached across the table and patted my hand. That was different, Mom. You were younger then. Things change. Things change, another phrase that would echo in my mind for weeks to come. Yes, things do change. I had changed from a respected businesswoman into someone who apparently couldn't be trusted to book her own vacation. But I went on that cruise anyway. And it was magnificent. I watched the sunrise over Santorini, toured the ancient ruins of Ephesus, and danced until midnight with a charming retired professor from Boston named Eleanor. I felt more alive than I had in years, more like myself than I had since my husband Robert passed 5 years ago. When I returned, bronzed and energized, my children's reaction was not the joy I had expected. Instead, I was greeted with an intervention. They gathered in my living room like a board of directors, armed with printed articles about elderly fraud, cruise ship accidents, and something called diminished capacity. Sandra had even brought a manila folder. Mom, we need to talk, David began, his lawyer voice in full effect. We've been researching, and we think you might benefit from some guidance with your financial decisions. Guidance? I set down my teacup with deliberate precision. I beg your pardon? Patricia jumped in, her voice sugary with false concern. We love you, Mom. But spending $8,000 on a cruise when you're on a fixed income. Fixed income? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. My dear, I have more money in my checking account than most people see in a year. My investments alone could fund several cruises. That's exactly what we're worried about, Sandra said, opening her folder. Elderly people are often targeted by cruise companies, jewelry salespeople, car dealers. They take advantage of cognitive changes. Cognitive changes. There it was, the elephant they had been circling for months. They thought I was losing my mind. I looked at my 3 children, these people I had raised with such hope and pride, and felt something cold settle in my chest. David, now 48, a successful attorney who lived in a house I had helped him buy. Sandra, 45, a marketing executive whose children's private school tuition I still supplemented. Patricia, 42, whose art gallery I had financially backed when no bank would give her a loan. Let me understand this correctly, I said, rising from my chair. You believe that because I chose to spend my own money on experiences that bring me joy, I am mentally incompetent? We didn't say incompetent, David backpedaled quickly. We just think that perhaps you should consult with us before making major purchases. Consult with you. I walked to the window, looking out at the garden I had designed and maintained for 30 years. As if I were a child asking permission to buy candy. Mom, please don't be dramatic, Sandra sighed. We're trying to protect you. From what? From living? And that's when Patricia dropped the bomb that would change everything between us. From yourself, she said quietly. Mom, you're not the same person you were 5 years ago. Since Dad died, you've been different, impulsive, reckless. Reckless. The woman who had never bounced a check, never missed a business deadline, never made a bad investment, was being called reckless by a daughter whose gallery I had saved from bankruptcy twice. I see, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. And what, pray tell, do you propose to do about this recklessness? The 3 of them exchanged those looks again, and I knew with crystalline clarity that they had discussed this without me, had planned this conversation, had decided my fate before even giving me a chance to defend myself. We think, David said carefully, that it might be wise to set up a financial oversight arrangement. Something simple, just to ensure that I don't spend my own money without your permission. That you don't get taken advantage of, Sandra corrected, but we both knew what she really meant. I stood there in my own living room, surrounded by furniture I had chosen, artwork I had collected, and memories I had created, and felt like a stranger in my own life. These people, whom I loved more than my own breath, were essentially asking me to hand over my financial independence based on the crime of buying myself a cruise and showing signs of happiness. I need you all to leave, I said quietly. Mom, Patricia started, now. They left, but not before Sandra placed her business card on my coffee table. When you're ready to talk rationally about this, call me, she said. We're doing this because we love you. Love. I stood alone in my house and wondered when love had become synonymous with control. When caring had transformed into condescension. When protecting someone meant protecting them from their own choices. That night, I called my attorney, James Morrison, a man I had known for 20 years. James, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Do I seem mentally incompetent to you? There was a long pause. Margaret, you are one of the sharpest people I know. Your mind is as clear as it was when we first met. Why would you ask such a thing? I told him about the intervention, about my children's concerns, about their suggestion of financial oversight. When I finished, there was another long silence. Margaret, he said finally, I need to tell you something. David contacted me last week. My blood turned to ice.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
What did he say? He asked about conservatorship proceedings. Hypothetically, he said. He wanted to know what it would take to have someone declared financially incompetent. The phone slipped from my hand, clattering onto the marble floor of my kitchen. My own son, my firstborn, had been researching how to legally strip me of my rights. Not because I had dementia, not because I was being defrauded, but because I had dared to spend my own money on my own happiness. I picked up the phone with shaking hands. "James, I need to see you. Tomorrow. First thing." "Margaret, there's something else. Patricia called yesterday. She asked about your will." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "My will?" She wanted to know if it was up to date and whether there were any provisions for what she called mental incapacity. "Margaret, I think you need to know that your children are organizing against you." After I hung up, I walked through my house like a ghost. Every room held memories of my children. The kitchen where I had taught Sandra to bake, the study where I had helped David with his law school applications, the sunroom where Patricia had painted her first watercolor. I had filled this house with love, with laughter, with the sound of family. Now that same family was plotting to take it all away. The next morning, I sat in James's office feeling like a defendant in my own life. "Tell me everything," I said. He opened a file and pulled out several documents. David has been quite thorough. He's researched elder law, financial abuse statutes, and conservatorship requirements. Patricia has been asking detailed questions about your estate planning. Sandra has requested copies of your medical records from Dr. Harrison. They what? She claimed she was helping you organize your healthcare information. Dr. Harrison thankfully refused without your written consent. I felt sick. "James, what are they planning?" "I believe they're building a case to have you declared financially incompetent. The cruise, any expensive purchases, anything they can characterize as impulsive or unusual behavior. They would petition the court for conservatorship, giving them control over your finances and medical decisions. Can they do that? If they can convince a judge that you lack the mental capacity to manage your affairs, yes. But Margaret, I want to be very clear about something. You are completely competent. Your mind is sharp. Your decisions are reasonable, and you have every right to spend your money as you see fit. Then why am I so scared? Because family members have an advantage in these proceedings. Courts tend to believe that children have their parents' best interests at heart, and because the burden of proof is lower than you might think. They don't need to prove you have dementia, just that you're making poor financial decisions." I thought about the Mercedes I had been looking at, the one Sandra had called ridiculous. What constitutes a poor financial decision? That's subjective. A luxury car might seem excessive to a judge, especially if your children present it as part of a pattern of impulsive spending. So I'm supposed to live like a pauper to prove I'm sane? That's the insidious part of these cases, Margaret. Your children will argue that any deviation from your previous spending patterns is evidence of cognitive decline. If you were frugal before Robert died and are now more generous with yourself, they'll call it a personality change, indicative of mental deterioration. I felt the walls closing in. What can I do? Several things. First, we can update your estate planning documents to include specific provisions about your mental capacity. Second, we can require multiple medical opinions before any conservatorship could be granted. Third, we can create a trust structure that protects your assets while still allowing you full control. And fourth? James leaned back in his chair, studying me carefully. Fourth, you can beat them at their own game. What do you mean? Your children are motivated by money, Margaret. They're not concerned about your well-being. They're concerned about their inheritance. What if there was no inheritance to worry about? The idea hit me like lightning. You're suggesting I disinherit them? I'm suggesting you take control of the narrative. Right now, they're painting you as an incompetent old woman making bad decisions. What if instead you became a competent woman making very deliberate decisions about who deserves your legacy? I thought about this for a long moment. Tell me more. We could restructure your estate planning, set up charitable trusts, endowments, foundations. Make it clear that your wealth will be used for purposes you believe in, not handed over to children who are trying to strip you of your autonomy. They would be furious. They would be powerless. And Margaret, here's the beautiful part. If they're genuinely concerned about your mental state, They should support decisions that ensure your money goes to good causes, rather than questioning every purchase you make for yourself. I left James's office with a plan, and for the first time in months, a sense of purpose. My children thought I was losing my mind. They would soon discover just how sharp that mind still was. The first test came 2 days later. I bought the Mercedes. Not because I desperately needed a new car, but because I needed to send a message. I walked into Henderson Luxury Motors, found Trevor, and said, "I'll take the pearl white sedan, fully loaded." Trevor's face lit up. "Excellent choice, Mrs. Sullivan. Will you be financing or—" "Cash," I said simply. "Well, a cashier's check. Same thing." Within an hour, Sandra was calling. "Mom, the bank called me." "I'm sorry. Why would the bank call you about my transaction?" I asked them to alert me to any large withdrawals from your account." My hand tightened on the phone. "You did what?" "For your protection, Mom. Elderly fraud is a real problem and—" "Sandra, you have exactly 10 seconds to explain to me how you gained access to information about my private banking transactions." "I'm listed as your emergency contact." "I just asked them to—" "You asked them to spy on me, to protect you from buying a car with my own money that I earned." "Mom, a $70,000 car is excessive for someone your age. Excessive for someone my age. And what age would be appropriate for a $70,000 car, Sandra? 60? 50? Or should I perhaps have purchased it when I was 30 and couldn't afford it?" "That's not what I meant." "That's exactly what you meant. You meant that because I'm 73, I should be content with less. That I should save my money for—" "What, exactly? My funeral?" "For your care, for emergencies, for your inheritance." The silence that followed was deafening. "Mom, that's not—" "It's exactly what this is about, Sandra. You're not concerned about my spending. You're concerned about your inheritance. You see every dollar I spend on myself as a dollar less for you. That's not true. Then prove it. Be happy that your mother is enjoying her golden years. Celebrate the fact that I can afford nice things. Stop treating every purchase I make like a theft from your future." I hung up before she could respond. The Mercedes was everything I had hoped it would be: smooth, quiet, luxurious. I drove it to the country club for lunch, and Evelyn Patterson complimented me on it immediately. "Margaret, what a gorgeous car! You look positively radiant behind the wheel." "Thank you, Evelyn. I'm treating myself these days." "Good for you. Robert would want you to enjoy yourself." Robert. I wondered what he would think of our children's behavior. He had been so proud of them, so sure we had raised them right. Would he have seen this coming? Would he have been able to stop it? That evening, David arrived unannounced. I watched from my kitchen window as he examined the Mercedes in my driveway, running his hands along the paint job, peering into the windows. When he knocked on my door, his face was a mask of concern that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Mom, we need to talk." "About my car? About your recent behavior?" "The cruise, now this car, the jewelry Sandra mentioned." "Mom, this isn't like you." I gestured for him to sit down, but remained standing myself. "David, let me ask you something. In all the years you've known me, have I ever made a bad financial decision? No, but have I ever been irresponsible with money?" "Mom, that's not the point." "It's exactly the point. You're telling me that my recent behavior isn't like me, but you're wrong. This is exactly like me. This is like the woman who built a successful business from nothing. This is like the woman who put 3 children through college without taking on debt. This is like the woman who helped you buy your first house, who funded Sandra's MBA, who saved Patricia's gallery from bankruptcy." David shifted uncomfortably. "Those were investments in family. And what I'm doing now are investments in myself. Tell me, David, why is one acceptable and the other cause for concern?" "Because—" He struggled for words. "Because you're older now. Because people change as they age. Because we've read about elderly people making impulsive decisions. Whose decisions hurt them financially? Sometimes yes. Have any of my decisions hurt me financially? Another pause. Not yet. Not yet. So you're preemptively concerned about decisions I haven't made based on problems I haven't experienced. I moved to the window, looking out at my beautiful new car. David, let me tell you what's really happening here. You and your sisters have decided that because I'm 73, I should live like I'm already dead. That I should hoard my money like a dragon guarding its treasure, taking it out only to look at it before putting it safely back away. Mom, that's not. You want me to live in fear. Fear of spending too much. Fear of enjoying too much. Fear of being too happy. Because God forbid your mother should be happy after your father's death. God forbid she should discover that life doesn't end at 70. David's facade cracked slightly. We just want what's best for you. No, David. You want what's best for you. And what's best for you is a mother who sits quietly in her house, spending as little as possible, preserving every penny for the day when you can inherit it. That's not true. Then why did you call James Morrison asking about conservatorship? The color drained from his face. How did you? James told me. He also told me about Patricia's questions regarding my will. Did you really think you could plan my legal and financial future without me finding out? David stood up, his lawyer training kicking in. Mom, we're concerned about your welfare. Recent studies show that dramatic changes in spending patterns can indicate early-stage dementia. Get out. What? Get out of my house. Now. Mom, please, let's discuss this rationally. There's nothing rational about children plotting against their parent. There's nothing rational about trying to steal someone's autonomy because you don't like their shopping habits. There's nothing rational about what you're doing to me. We're not trying to hurt you. I walked to the front door and opened it. You're trying to bury me while I'm still alive. And that, David, hurts more than you can possibly imagine. After he left, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in my study, surrounded by the awards and accolades I had earned over the years. Businesswoman of the Year, Outstanding Entrepreneur, Community Leader. I had been respected, admired, successful. I had raised 3 children who had grown into successful adults. And now those same children thought I was losing my mind because I had finally started living for myself. My phone rang. Patricia. Mom, David called me. He said you were upset. Upset is a mild word for what I am, Patricia. Mom, we love you. We're just scared. Scared of what? Of losing you. Of watching you change into someone we don't recognize. The person you don't recognize is the person I've always been. Underneath the mother. Underneath the caregiver. Underneath the woman who spent 40 years putting everyone else's needs before her own. This is who I am when I'm not taking care of everyone else. But Mom, spending so much money is my right. It's my money, Patricia. I earned it, I saved it, I invested it wisely for decades. And now, in what may be the last good years of my life, I want to enjoy it. But what if you need long-term care? What if you run out of money? And there it was, the real fear. Not that I would hurt myself, but that I wouldn't leave enough behind for them. Patricia, I have more than enough money to live comfortably for the rest of my life, even if I live to be 100. Even with the cruise, even with the car, even with whatever else I choose to buy for myself. My spending is not going to leave me destitute. But the inheritance. What inheritance? Silence. Patricia, did you just say what I think you said? I meant, Mom, we just assumed. You assumed that because I'm your mother, everything I have will automatically be yours when I die. Isn't it? The honest question hit me like a physical blow. My daughter, my youngest child, genuinely believed that my wealth was already hers, that my choices about how to spend it were somehow theft from her future. Patricia, let me be very clear about something. Nothing I own belongs to you. Nothing I have is guaranteed to you. Everything I have earned is mine to do with as I please, including giving it all away to charity if I choose. You wouldn't do that. Why not? Because we're your children. And as my children, you should want me to be happy. You should want me to enjoy the fruits of my labor. You should be proud that your mother is healthy enough and wealthy enough to live well in her 70s. We do want that. No, Patricia. You want me to live like a pauper so you can inherit like a princess. I hung up and immediately called James Morrison. James, I want to move forward with the estate restructuring. All of it. Are you certain, Margaret? I have never been more certain of anything in my life. As I hung up the phone, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. My children thought I was losing my mind, but I had never seen more clearly. They wanted to control me to protect their inheritance, but they had just given me the perfect weapon to protect myself. If they wanted to treat me like I was incompetent, I would show them what real competence looked like. I would take control of my money, my life, and my legacy in a way that would leave no doubt about the sharpness of my mind. The war they had started was about to become very interesting indeed. The first sign that my children had escalated their campaign came on a Tuesday morning when Dr. Harrison's office called. Mrs. Sullivan, we've had another request for your medical records. This time from Patricia. She's claiming to be your healthcare proxy. My coffee cup stopped halfway to my lips. She's what? She presented a document stating that you've appointed her as your medical decision-maker. We wanted to verify this with you directly before releasing anything. I felt the familiar chill of betrayal wash over me. Dr. Harrison, I have never signed such a document. Patricia has no authority over my medical care. I thought as much. The document looked questionable. Mrs. Sullivan, I feel I should warn you that this is the third request we've received in the past 2 weeks. First, Sandra asking for records to help you organize your health care, then David requesting information about any cognitive assessments, and now this. 3 of them. All circling like vultures, each trying a different approach to access my private medical information. Dr. Harrison, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. In your professional opinion, do I show any signs of cognitive decline or mental incapacity? There was no hesitation in his response. Margaret, you are one of the most mentally acute patients I have. Your cognitive function is excellent for someone of any age, let alone 73. Why are you asking? I told him everything. About the interventions, the financial monitoring, the conservatorship research. When I finished, there was a long pause. Margaret, what your children are doing is not uncommon, unfortunately. I've seen this pattern before. Adult children become concerned about inheritance and begin pathologizing normal aging and lifestyle changes. They mistake independence for incapacity, happiness for delusion. Is there anything you can do to help? I can document your mental acuity. I can perform cognitive assessments. I can create a comprehensive medical record that clearly states your competency. But Margaret, I need to warn you about something. If your children do file for conservatorship, they'll likely require you to be examined by a court-appointed psychiatrist. And those evaluations can be subjective. That afternoon, I met with James Morrison again. This time, I brought my own folder filled with bank statements, investment portfolios, and business records spanning the past 5 years. James, I want you to see exactly how incompetent I am, I said, spreading the documents across his desk. Here are my investment returns since Robert died. Up 37%. Here are my business sale proceeds, which I've managed to grow by another 20% through careful reinvestment. Here are my monthly expenses, which have remained consistent except for the recent purchases my children find so alarming. James reviewed the documents with growing amazement. Margaret, these returns are exceptional. Your financial management has been exemplary. Then help me understand how spending less than 2% of my liquid assets on a cruise in a car constitutes evidence of mental decline. It doesn't. What it constitutes is evidence of your children's greed. We spent the next 2 hours restructuring my entire estate. I established the Margaret Sullivan Foundation for Women's Entrepreneurship, endowing it with 60% of my wealth. The remaining 40% would be divided equally among various charities. The local animal shelter where Robert and I had volunteered, the community college where I had taught business classes, and the children's hospital where I had served on the board for 15 years. My children would receive personal items of sentimental value, and $10,000 each. Enough to know they hadn't been forgotten, not enough to justify years of harassment. Are you certain about this, Margaret? James asked as I signed the final documents. This is a significant decision. James, they've forced this decision. They've made it clear that they see me as nothing more than a bank account with legs. If that's all I am to them, then I choose to be a bank account that funds causes I believe in, rather than children who've lost their way. The irony was delicious. By questioning my mental capacity to make financial decisions, they had prompted me to make the most decisive financial decision of my life. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in months. I called my sister Helen in Arizona. "Helen, I need to tell you what's been happening." Helen listened without interruption as I recounted the past few months. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Margaret, I have to tell you something. Sandra called me last week." My stomach dropped. "What did she say?" "She asked if I had noticed any changes in your behavior. She wanted to know if you seemed different when we talked, if you were making unusual decisions. She even asked if I thought you might benefit from professional help." Professional help. She suggested that maybe you were having a difficult time coping with Robert's death, and that your recent spending might be a form of grief-induced mania. I felt sick. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that you seemed happier and more energetic than you'd been since Robert died. I told her that spending money on yourself after years of frugality wasn't mental illness, it was mental health. I told her she should be grateful to have a mother who was thriving instead of withering away." How did she respond? "She said I didn't understand the full situation, that they were concerned about your future care needs, and that impulsive spending could jeopardize your security." "Helen, I have enough money to live comfortably for 50 more years. I know that, and you know that. But Margaret, I think your children see your bank account as their retirement plan." The truth of that statement hit me like a physical blow. While I had been grieving Robert and slowly rediscovering joy, my children had been calculating their inheritance and planning their futures around my death. "Helen, there's something else. I've changed my will." I explained about the foundation, about the charitable donations, about their modest bequests. Helen was quiet for a long time. "How do you feel about it?" she finally asked. "Relieved. For the first time in months, I feel like I'm in control of my own life." "Good. Margaret, you raised those children to be independent, successful adults. You don't owe them a fortune just because you were able to accumulate one." After we hung up, I walked through my house with new eyes. Every piece of furniture, every painting, every carefully chosen accessory represented years of hard work and careful planning. I had built this life through my own efforts, and I would decide how it ended. The next morning brought a surprise visitor. Patricia arrived unannounced, carrying a stack of brochures and wearing the kind of determined expression that meant trouble. "Mom, I've been doing some research, and I think I've found the perfect solution for everyone." She spread the brochures across my coffee table. Assisted living facilities, luxury senior communities, independent living with graduated care options. "Patricia, what is this?" "Options, Mom. Ways for you to maintain your independence while having support systems in place. Look at this one, Meadowbrook Manor. It's beautiful, and they have everything. A spa, a golf course, organized activities, medical care on site." I picked up one of the brochures. The facility looked lovely, but the implication was clear. "You want me to sell my house and move to a senior community. I want you to be safe and happy. And Mom, think about the financial advantages. No more maintenance costs, no more yard work, no more worrying about repairs. You could sell this big house and use the proceeds to pay for a lovely apartment at Meadowbrook. And what happens to the money left over from the sale?" Patricia's smile flickered slightly. "Well, you'd have it for your care, of course. And eventually, well, it would be preserved for the family." There it was again. Preserved for the family. As if my money was a museum piece to be protected rather than a resource for me to enjoy. "Patricia, I'm not interested in moving to a senior facility." "But Mom, you're all alone in this big house. What if something happens? What if you fall or get sick?" "The same thing that happens to anyone who falls or gets sick. I go to the hospital. But wouldn't it be better to have help readily available?" I set down the brochure and looked at my youngest daughter. "Patricia, Let me ask you something. If you were 73 and healthy, would you want to move to a senior community? That's different. How? Because when I'm 73, things will be different. Things like what? She fumbled for words. Technology, medical care, the world in general. What you mean is that when you're 73, you'll still see yourself as a competent adult deserving of respect and autonomy. But when I'm 73 right now, I'm just an old woman who needs to be managed. That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant. Patricia, I don't need to be managed. I don't need to be protected from my own choices. I don't need to have my life simplified and sanitized for my own good. But the financial advantages are for you, not me. You want me to liquidate my largest asset and move into a situation where my expenses are fixed and predictable. You want to know exactly how much money I'm spending and exactly how much will be left when I die. Patricia's composure finally cracked. Mom, is it so wrong for us to be concerned about our inheritance? You worked hard to build wealth, and we assumed it was meant to benefit the family. I worked hard to build wealth so that I could live well and have security. Any benefit to the family was secondary. But we're your children. And as my children, your first concern should be my happiness, not your inheritance. Patricia gathered up her brochures with shaking hands. Mom, you're not being fair. We've tried to be respectful, we've tried to approach this gently, but you're being stubborn and unreasonable. I'm being what? Stubborn, unreasonable. You won't listen to our concerns, you won't consider our suggestions, you won't even acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, we know what's best for you. I stood up slowly, feeling every one of my 73 years. Patricia, you've just said something very revealing. You think you know what's best for me better than I do. You think that because I'm older, I've lost the ability to make good decisions for myself. That's not. You think that because you're younger, you're smarter. That because you're concerned, you're right. That because you love me, you own me. We don't want to own you, you want to control me. You want to decide where I live, how I spend my money, what medical care I receive, and how I structure my life. If that's not ownership, it's close enough. Patricia's face flushed red. Fine, be stubborn, make bad decisions, spend all your money on ridiculous luxuries. But don't come crying to us when you're broke and alone. I won't be broke, Patricia, but I'm beginning to understand what alone feels like. After she left, I sat in my study and tried to remember the little girl who used to bring me dandelions from the yard, who would curl up in my lap while I read her stories, who told me she wanted to be just like me when she grew up. Where had that child gone? When had love transformed into greed? When had concern become control? My phone rang. It was Evelyn Patterson from the country club. Margaret, dear, I hope you don't mind me calling, but I heard something today that troubled me. What did you hear? I was at the bank, and I overheard Sandra talking to someone about having you declared incompetent. She was asking about the legal requirements and timelines. The room began to spin. She was at the bank? With a man in a suit. They seemed to be discussing some kind of legal action. Margaret, I thought you should know. I thanked Evelyn and immediately called James Morrison. James, they're moving forward. Sandra was at the bank today discussing legal action. Margaret, how quickly can you get to my office? I'm leaving now. 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from James as he laid out the gravity of the situation. Margaret, if they file for conservatorship, there will be a hearing. You'll need to prove your competency, which shouldn't be difficult, given your mental acuity and financial records. But the process itself is invasive and humiliating. They'll question every decision you've made, every purchase, every choice. Can we stop them from filing? No, but we can be prepared. I'm going to arrange for comprehensive cognitive testing by a neurologist and a psychiatrist. I want documented proof of your mental capacity. I'm also going to prepare a detailed financial analysis showing your excellent money management. What about the estate changes? Those are already in place and irrevocable. The foundation has been established. The charitable bequests are confirmed. Even if they were to gain conservatorship, they couldn't undo those decisions because you made them while clearly competent. I felt a grim satisfaction. So they can question my capacity all they want, but the money is already beyond their reach. Exactly. And Margaret, there's something else. I think it's time to go on the offensive. What do you mean? I mean, it's time to show them that their mother is not a helpless old woman to be managed, but a formidable opponent they've greatly underestimated. Over the next week, I underwent every test James could arrange. Cognitive assessments, memory evaluations, psychological profiles. The results were exactly what I expected. Superior cognitive function, excellent judgment, no signs of dementia or impairment. Dr. Rebecca Chen, the neurologist, was particularly impressed. Mrs. Sullivan, your cognitive abilities are in the top 10% for your age group. Your memory, reasoning, and decision-making skills are all excellent. I would have no hesitation testifying to your mental competency in any legal proceeding. Armed with this documentation, James and I prepared for what we expected would be an inevitable legal battle. But I had one more card to play, one more move that would demonstrate exactly how sharp my supposedly declining mind really was. I called a family meeting. David, Sandra, and Patricia arrived at my house that Sunday afternoon looking like they were attending a funeral. In a way, they were. This would be the death of their assumptions about their inheritance and their control over my life. I've called you here today because we need to clear the air about several issues, I began, standing at the head of my dining room table like the CEO I had once been. Mom, if this is about the assisted living brochures, Patricia started, this is about all of it. The financial monitoring, the medical record requests, the conservatorship research, the assisted living suggestions, and the fundamental disrespect you've shown me over the past several months. David leaned forward. Mom, we've only been trying to help. You've been trying to control me. There's a difference. I opened the folder I had prepared and began distributing documents. These are the results of comprehensive cognitive and psychological evaluations I've undergone in the past week. As you can see, my mental capacity is excellent. There is no medical basis for your concerns about my competency. They scanned the documents with growing discomfort. These are my financial records for the past 5 years, showing consistent, excellent money management and investment returns that exceed market averages. More uncomfortable silence. And this, I said, distributing the final set of documents, is my new will and estate plan. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched as each of them read through the documents, their faces changing from confusion to shock to anger. Sandra was the first to speak. Mom, you can't be serious. I'm completely serious. David's lawyer training kicked in. This is clearly a decision made under duress. No competent person would disinherit their children for a charity. David, you just called me incompetent in the same breath as questioning a decision about competency. Do you see the irony? Patricia was staring at the documents with tears in her eyes. Mom, why are you punishing us? I'm not punishing you, Patricia. I'm making decisions about my money based on my values and priorities. But we're your family. And you've spent months treating me like I'm not capable of making my own decisions about my own life. You've monitored my spending, requested my medical records, researched ways to legally control me, and suggested I give up my independence. Family members who truly love and respect each other don't do those things. Sandra slammed her papers down on the table. This is ridiculous. You're acting like a petulant child. I'm acting like a competent adult who refuses to be treated like an incompetent child. Mom, David said, trying his lawyer voice, you're making emotional decisions that you'll regret. The foundation, the charitable giving, these aren't rational choices for someone in your position. My position? And what position is that, David? A 73-year-old widow who needs to preserve her assets for potential long-term care needs. I have more than enough assets for any care needs I might have, even after these donations. But that's not really what this is about, is it? The three of them exchanged glances, and I could see them calculating, trying to figure out if there was any way to reverse what I had done. Mom, Sandra said carefully, perhaps we were too aggressive in our approach. Perhaps we should have talked to you more before taking action. Perhaps. Could we discuss revising some of these estate decisions? No, but if we promise to be more respectful. Sandra, you missed the point entirely. This isn't about promises or negotiations. This is about the fact that you've shown me who you really are. You've shown me that your primary concern isn't my well-being, it's your inheritance. Patricia was crying now. Mom, we do care about your well-being. We were scared. Scared of what? Scared of losing you. Scared of you changing. Scared of you being taken advantage of. You were scared of losing your inheritance. Everything else was just convenient justification. David stood up abruptly. Fine. You want to give all your money away? Go ahead. But don't expect us to pretend this is normal behavior. David, what I expect is for you to respect my right to make my own decisions about my own life and my own money. If you can't do that, then perhaps it's better that we have this distance. You're really going to choose money over family? I looked at my eldest son, this man I had raised with such pride, and felt a deep sadness. David, you chose money over family the moment you started researching conservatorship instead of simply accepting that your mother had found happiness again. After they left, I sat alone in my house and felt peaceful. For the first time in months, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't wondering what they were planning next. I had taken control of the situation in a way that protected both my autonomy and my assets. The next few weeks were quiet. My children didn't call, didn't visit, didn't send texts. I wondered if they were consulting lawyers, trying to find ways to challenge my estate plan or my competency. But I wasn't worried. I had covered every angle. Instead, I focused on the positive changes in my life. I joined the board of the Women's Entrepreneurship Program at the community college. I volunteered more hours at the animal shelter. I started taking painting classes at the local art center. And I kept spending my money on things that brought me joy. A weekend trip to Charleston. A beautiful new dress for the country club's annual gala. A subscription to the opera series downtown. Each purchase felt like a small victory, a declaration of independence from the children who had tried to monitor and control my every financial move. 3 weeks after our family meeting, I received a call from an unexpected source. My grandson Michael, Sandra's eldest boy, now 25 and working as a teacher. Grandma, can we talk? Of course, sweetheart. What's on your mind? Mom told me about the will changes. She's pretty upset. I sighed. Of course, Sandra had involved her children in this drama. I'm sure she is. Grandma, can I ask you something? Are you really giving everything to charity because Mom and Uncle David and Aunt Patricia were mean to you? The question, asked with such innocent directness, made me smile. Michael, it's more complicated than that. Can you explain it to me? Because honestly, I don't understand what happened. I thought about how to explain months of condescension, control, and disrespect to a young man who had always known me as simply his loving grandmother. Michael, your mother and uncle and aunt decided that because I'm 73, I'm no longer capable of making good decisions about my own life. They've spent months trying to control how I spend my money, where I live, and what medical care I receive. But why would they do that? Because they were more concerned about preserving their inheritance than respecting my autonomy. There was a long pause. Grandma, that's really messed up. It hurt me very deeply, Michael. I can imagine. Grandma, for what it's worth, I think you're awesome. I think it's cool that you went on a cruise by yourself and bought a fancy car. I hope when I'm 73, I'm brave enough to do things like that. His words brought tears to my eyes. Thank you, sweetheart. That means more to me than you know. Grandma, can I ask you one more thing? Anything. Do you think there's any way this could be fixed? I mean, I know Mom was wrong, but she's still my mom, and you're still her mom, and it seems really sad that everyone's fighting. Michael, I would love nothing more than to have a good relationship with your mother and your uncle and aunt, but that would require them to genuinely apologize and change their behavior. And I don't think they're willing to do that. What if they were? The hope in his voice broke my heart. Then we would have to see, wouldn't we? But I didn't hold out much hope. People don't usually change fundamental attitudes overnight, especially when money is involved. I was wrong. The call came 2 days later from David. Mom, we need to talk. All of us. Can we come over tonight? Something in his voice was different. Less defensive, less aggressive. What's changed, David? We've been doing some thinking. Some research. Some soul-searching. And we owe you an apology. A real one. That evening, my 3 children arrived at my door looking like they had been through an emotional ringer. Sandra's eyes were red from crying. Patricia looked exhausted. David seemed older somehow, more subdued. Mom, Sandra began. We owe you the biggest apology of our lives." I gestured for them to sit, but remained standing myself. I wasn't ready to be vulnerable yet. "We talked to Dr. Harrison," David continued. "We asked him directly about your mental capacity, your cognitive function, your ability to make decisions. And he told us that we were way out of line, that you're completely competent, and that our concerns were unfounded and inappropriate." Patricia jumped in. "We also talked to your financial advisor. He showed us your investment performance, your portfolio management, your financial planning. Mom, you've been brilliant with money. I've been telling you that for months." "We know," Sandra said miserably. "We weren't listening." David leaned forward. "Mom, we think we know what happened. We think we were so caught up in our own fears about aging, about losing you, about our own financial insecurities, that we projected all of that onto you." "Explain that." "Sandra lost a big client last year and was worried about her own financial stability. I've been concerned about the kids' college costs and retirement planning. Patricia's gallery has been struggling since the pandemic. I felt a chill of understanding. So you were counting on my money to solve your problems." "Not consciously," Patricia said quickly. "At least, I don't think it was conscious. But yes, I think we all had this assumption that, eventually, your money would help secure our futures. And when I started spending it on myself, we panicked," Sandra admitted. "We saw every dollar you spent as a dollar we wouldn't inherit, and we convinced ourselves that your spending was irrational so we could justify trying to control it. The honesty was refreshing but also painful. So you weren't concerned about my well-being, you were concerned about your inheritance." "Both," David said. "I think we convinced ourselves that protecting your money was the same as protecting you. But we were wrong." They sat in silence for a moment, and I could see they were waiting for me to respond. But I wasn't ready to forgive yet. The hurt had been too deep, the betrayal too complete. "What do you want from me?" I asked finally. "Forgiveness," Patricia whispered. "And?" They exchanged glances. "And we were hoping maybe you would consider changing the will back." There it was. Even in their apology, even in their apparent contrition, they were still thinking about the money. "No," I said simply. "Mom," Sandra started. "No. You've just spent 20 minutes apologizing for putting money before family, and in the same breath, you're asking me to give you that money. Do you see the contradiction?" David's face flushed. "We just thought, if we really understood now, if we really changed, then you would prove it through your actions, not through what you might inherit from me." I walked to the window, looking out at the garden where I had taught them to plant vegetables when they were small. Here's what's going to happen. The will stays as it is. The foundation and the charitable bequests remain in place. "But Mom," "However," I continued, "if you can demonstrate for a sustained period, let's say 2 years, that you genuinely respect my autonomy and my decisions, if you can show me that your concern is for my happiness rather than your inheritance, then we can discuss rebuilding our relationship." "What about the money?" Patricia asked. "The money is gone from your future, Patricia. It was never yours to begin with, and it never will be. If you can accept that and still want a relationship with me, then maybe we can find our way back to being a family." Sandra was crying again. "Mom, I know we don't deserve it, but we love you. We really do." "I love you too," I said, and meant it. "But love without respect isn't enough anymore. You'll have to decide if you want a mother or a bank account. You can't have both." They left that night without any resolution, but with a clear understanding of the terms. They could have a relationship with me, but only if they genuinely changed their attitudes and behavior. The money was off the table permanently. As I locked the door behind them, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: complete autonomy. For the first time since Robert died, no one was questioning my decisions, monitoring my spending, or trying to control my choices. I was free to be exactly who I wanted to be, and if my children chose to be part of that life, it would be because they valued me as a person, not as a source of future wealth. The next morning, I drove my beautiful Mercedes to the foundation office and began the work of building something meaningful with my money. Something that would help other women achieve the kind of independence I had fought so hard to maintain. It felt like the first day of the rest of my life. 2 months passed before I heard from any of my children again. 2 months of blissful silence where I lived my life without scrutiny, without judgment, without anyone questioning my choices or monitoring my bank account. I threw myself into the foundation work with an energy I hadn't felt in years, screening applicants for grants, mentoring women entrepreneurs, and discovering a sense of purpose that had nothing to do with being someone's mother or grandmother. The foundation office became my second home. Every morning I would drive my Mercedes through the city streets, feeling the satisfaction of a woman who owned her own destiny. We had already awarded our first round of grants, $50,000 to help Maria Gonzalez expand her catering business, $30,000 to assist Jennifer Park in launching her tech startup, $25,000 to support Ruth Washington's daycare center expansion. These women reminded me of myself at their age, ambitious, determined, and needing just a little financial boost to achieve their dreams. "Mrs. Sullivan," my assistant Carla said one Tuesday morning, "there's a woman here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's important." I looked up from the grant applications I was reviewing to see Angela, my daughter-in-law, standing in the doorway of my office. She looked terrible, thin, pale, with dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. "Angela, this is unexpected." She stepped into my office hesitantly, clutching a tissue in her white-knuckled hands. "Mrs. Sullivan, I hope you don't mind me coming here. I know things are complicated with the family right now." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Sit down. Would you like some coffee?" "No, thank you." She perched on the edge of the chair like she might flee at any moment. "Mrs. Sullivan, I need to tell you something. Something David doesn't know I'm here." I waited, studying this woman who had been part of our family for 20 years. Angela had always been the quietest of my children's spouses, the peacekeeper, the one who tried to smooth over conflicts rather than engage in them. "I need to apologize to you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "for what we did. For what David did. For what I let happen." "Go on." "When David first suggested that maybe you were making poor decisions, I disagreed. I told him you seemed happier than you'd been since Mr. Sullivan died. I said that spending money on yourself wasn't a sign of mental decline, it was a sign of mental health. But you didn't speak up during the family meetings." Angela's face crumpled. I should have defended you." But David was so convinced, and Sandra was so persuasive, and Patricia seemed so worried. They made me doubt my own instincts. "What changed your mind?" "My mother." Angela looked up at me with eyes full of regret. "My mother is 81, and last month she decided to sell her house and move into a luxury retirement community. She's been saving money her whole life, and now she wants to spend it on a beautiful apartment with housekeeping service and gourmet meals and organized activities." I could see where this was going. My brother tried to talk her out of it. He said it was too expensive, that she should preserve her assets, that she might need that money for medical care. He started questioning her judgment, suggesting that maybe she wasn't thinking clearly. And I realized I was hearing the exact same arguments we had used against you. The exact same condescending tone, the same assumption that an older person's desire to spend money on comfort and happiness was somehow evidence of diminished capacity. Angela stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the bustling street below. "I watched my mother's face during that conversation, Mrs. Sullivan. I saw the hurt, the confusion, the betrayal, and I realized that was exactly how you must have felt when we did the same thing to you." "It was painful," I admitted. "I went home that night and told David that we had been wrong. I said that trying to control your spending was no different from my brother trying to control my mother's spending. I said that we owed you an apology, and that we needed to back off completely." "How did David react?" Angela's laugh was bitter. "He said I didn't understand the full situation. He said your case was different because you were making more extreme decisions. He said we had a responsibility as your children to protect you from yourself. So you came here without his knowledge." "I came here because I couldn't live with myself anymore. Mrs. Sullivan, what we did to you was wrong. It was disrespectful and condescending and motivated by selfishness, even if we didn't want to admit it. I studied Angela's face, searching for any sign of manipulation or ulterior motive. All I saw was genuine remorse and exhaustion. Angela, I appreciate you coming here. I appreciate your honesty. But you're not the one who needs to apologize to me. I know, but David is struggling with this. He's angry about the will changes, hurt that you cut them out, and convinced that you're punishing him unfairly for trying to protect you. And what do you think? I think you protected yourself the only way you could. I think you made a difficult decision to preserve your autonomy and dignity. I think we forced you into a corner and you found a way out. We sat in silence for a moment, and I found myself remembering all the family gatherings where Angela had been present but quiet, supportive but non-confrontational. She had always been more of an observer than a participant in family dynamics. Angela, can I ask you something? Of course. In all the years you've known me, have I ever made a decision that harmed myself or anyone else? Never. Have I ever been irresponsible with money? Just the opposite. You've been incredibly generous and wise with your resources. Then why did you let them convince you I was suddenly incompetent? Angela was quiet for a long time, considering the question, because it was easier than confronting the truth. Which was that we were scared. Scared of losing you, scared of facing our own aging, scared of dealing with our own financial insecurities without the safety net of your wealth. And that fear justified trying to control me? Nothing justified that. Mrs. Sullivan, I know you probably won't want to hear this, but David is miserable. He's barely sleeping, barely eating. He knows he was wrong, but he's too proud to admit it fully. That sounds like David's problem to solve. It is. But Mrs. Sullivan, he's also my husband and the father of my children. And watching him destroy his relationship with his mother is tearing our family apart. I felt a familiar pang of sadness. Despite everything, I still loved my son. Despite his attempts to control me, despite his assumption that I was losing my mind, despite his research into conservatorship, he was still the little boy I had taught to ride a bike and helped with homework and cheered at baseball games. What do you want me to do, Angela? I don't know, I guess I was hoping you might have some wisdom about how to fix this. I considered her request carefully. The truth was, I did miss my children. I missed the family dinners, the holiday celebrations, the sense of connection that had sustained me through Robert's death. But I also knew that I couldn't go back to the way things had been. I couldn't accept a relationship based on their tolerance of my choices rather than their respect for my autonomy. Angela, I've learned something important over the past few months. I've learned that love without respect is not enough. I love my children, but I won't sacrifice my dignity for their comfort. I understand that. Do you? Because what you're asking me to do is make the first move toward reconciliation. You're asking me to reach out to the people who tried to have me declared incompetent, who monitored my bank account without permission, who researched ways to legally control my life. Angela winced. When you put it like that, that's exactly what happened. And now you want me to fix the relationship they damaged? I want my family back together, Angela said quietly. I want my children to have a relationship with their grandmother. I want David to stop carrying around this guilt and anger. I want things to go back to normal. Normal wasn't working for me, Angela. Normal meant being treated like a child who needed supervision. Normal meant having my every decision questioned and my mental capacity doubted. Then what would work for you? I thought about that question for a long time. What would work for me? What would a healthy relationship with my children look like after everything that had happened? Genuine respect for my autonomy. Complete acceptance of my right to make my own decisions about my own life and money. No more monitoring. No more suggestions about what I should do or how I should live. And most importantly, a relationship based on who I am as a person, not what I might leave them when I die. The will changes really hurt them. Good, they should hurt. They should serve as a permanent reminder of what happens when you treat someone you claim to love as if they're incompetent. Angela looked shocked at my bluntness. Angela, My children spent months making me feel like I was losing my mind for wanting to enjoy my own money. They made me question my own judgment, doubt my own decisions, and feel ashamed for finding happiness after grief. The will changes weren't punishment. They were protection. Protection from what? From ever being in that position again. From ever having to worry that my children see me as a source of money, rather than a person deserving of respect. Angela sat quietly for several minutes, absorbing what I had said. Finally, she looked up at me with something that might have been understanding. "Mrs. Sullivan, if David were to genuinely apologize, not just for the sake of the money but because he truly understands that what he did was wrong, would you be willing to rebuild a relationship with him?" "That would depend on the apology and the behavior that follows it. But the will would stay the same?" "The will stays the same regardless." "That decision is final and non-negotiable." Angela nodded slowly. "I think I understand. You need to know that any relationship you have with them is because they value you as a person, not because they're hoping to inherit your money." "Exactly. That's actually really smart." I smiled for the first time since she had arrived. "I'm a smart woman, Angela. It took me 73 years to start acting like it." After Angela left, I sat in my office thinking about family, love, and the complicated dynamics that bind us together and tear us apart. I thought about Robert and how he might have handled this situation. He had always been the mediator in our family, the one who smoothed over conflicts and found compromises. But Robert had never faced what I was facing. He had never been treated like he was losing his mind for making perfectly reasonable decisions. He had never had his children research ways to legally control him. He had never been forced to choose between his dignity and his family. That evening, I was preparing dinner when my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I could see David standing on my front porch holding a bouquet of flowers. He looked older than his 48 years, and I could see the weight of stress in his posture. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. "Hello, David." "Hi, Mom. I brought you these." He held out the flowers, white roses that had always been my favorite. "Thank you." I took the bouquet but remained in the doorway. "Mom, can we talk? Please?" I studied my son's face, looking for signs of the anger and defensiveness that had characterized our last few encounters. Instead, I saw something I hadn't expected: humility. "Come in." He followed me to the kitchen, where I put the flowers in a vase and continued preparing my dinner. "Are you staying for dinner?" "I don't want to impose. I'm making pot roast." "There's plenty." "That would be nice." We moved around the kitchen in a familiar dance, David setting the table while I finished cooking. For a few minutes, it felt like old times, like the thousands of dinners we had shared when he was growing up. "Mom, I need to tell you something." "I'm listening." "I've been seeing a therapist." I looked up from the potatoes I was mashing, surprised. "Angela suggested it after our last conversation. She said I needed to understand why I was so convinced you were making bad decisions, when there was no evidence to support that belief. And what did you discover?" David sat down heavily at the kitchen table, the same table where he had done homework as a child, where we had celebrated birthdays and holidays, where we had shared countless meals as a family. "I discovered that I'm terrified of losing you." "David, let me finish, please. I discovered that watching you change after Dad died, seeing you become more independent and adventurous and willing to spend money on yourself, triggered some deep fear in me about mortality and loss, and my own future security." I turned off the stove and gave him my full attention. The therapist helped me understand that I was projecting my own anxieties onto you. My fear of aging, my worry about my own financial future, my inability to accept that you were moving on from grief in a healthy way. Go on. I convinced myself that your happiness was evidence of mental decline because I couldn't accept that you were genuinely thriving without Dad. I couldn't accept that you didn't need us to take care of you. David's voice cracked slightly. "And I couldn't accept that you might choose to spend your money on yourself instead of preserving it for us." The honesty was painful but necessary. "Mom, I was wrong. Not just a little wrong, but fundamentally, completely, unforgivably wrong. You weren't losing your mind, you were finding yourself." You weren't making bad decisions. You were making brave ones. You weren't being irresponsible. You were being independent. I sat down across from him, this man who was my son but also a stranger who had tried to control my life. David, do you understand what you put me through? I'm beginning to. You made me doubt my own judgment. You made me question decisions I knew were right. You made me feel ashamed for being happy. I know. You researched ways to legally declare me incompetent. You enlisted your sisters in monitoring my bank account. You treated me like a child who needed supervision. David's eyes filled with tears. I know. And Mom, I will spend the rest of my life regretting it. Regret isn't enough, David. I know that too. That's why I'm here. Not to ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve that yet. Not to ask you to change the will. I understand why you made those decisions. I'm here to ask you to give me a chance to prove that I can be the son you deserve. What does that look like? Complete respect for your autonomy. No more questions about your spending, your decisions, your choices. No more unsolicited advice about how you should live your life. No more assumptions about what's best for you. And a relationship based on who you are, not what you might leave me. Mom, I want you in my life because you're my mother and I love you, not because I hope to inherit your money someday. I looked at this man who had caused me so much pain and saw, perhaps for the first time, genuine remorse and understanding. David, the will doesn't change. Not now, not ever. I understand. Your inheritance is $10,000 and whatever personal items you want. That's it. I understand. And if you ever question my mental capacity or try to control my decisions again, I will cut you out of my life completely. I understand. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the past few months hanging between us. Mom, can I ask you something? What? Are you happy? I mean, really happy. With the choices you've made? I thought about the question carefully. Was I happy? I was living in my own house, making my own decisions, spending my own money as I saw fit. I was running a foundation that was making a real difference in women's lives. I was free from the constant scrutiny and judgment that had made me feel like a prisoner in my own life. Yes, David, I'm happier than I've been in years. Then I'm glad. Whatever else happens, I'm glad you found your way to happiness. Over the next few weeks, David proved that his apology was genuine. He called regularly, but never with questions about my activities or concerns about my spending. He visited, but without agenda or judgment. He seemed genuinely interested in my foundation work, asking thoughtful questions about the women we were helping and the projects we were funding. Sandra took longer to come around. When she finally called, 3 weeks after David's visit, her apology was more grudging, more focused on her own hurt feelings than on the damage she had caused me. Mom, I think we both made mistakes, she began, and I knew immediately that she didn't truly understand what had happened. Sandra, what mistakes do you think I made? Well, maybe you could have been more understanding of our concerns. Maybe you could have included us more in your decision-making. Sandra, I'm 73 years old. I don't need to include anyone in my decision-making about my own life. But we're your family. And as my family, you should support my right to make my own choices, not try to control those choices. The conversation didn't go well. Sandra was still convinced that she had been justified in her concerns. Still believed that my spending patterns were evidence of poor judgment. Still thought that the will changes were an overreaction to their legitimate worries. Patricia was somewhere in the middle. She acknowledged that they had been wrong, but seemed more focused on the consequences than on the underlying behavior that had caused them. Mom, I understand why you're angry, she said during her apologetic phone call. But don't you think permanently cutting us out of your will is a bit extreme? Patricia, do you think trying to have your mother declared incompetent is extreme? We never actually filed anything. You researched it. You considered it. You treated it as a viable option for dealing with a mother who dared to spend her own money. But we realized we were wrong. You realized you were wrong only after I took control of the situation. If I hadn't restructured my estate, if I hadn't demonstrated my competency through formal testing, would you have realized you were wrong? Or would you have continued trying to control my life? Patricia couldn't answer that question, and her silence told me everything I needed to know. As the months passed, my relationship with David slowly improved. He consistently demonstrated respect for my autonomy, never questioning my decisions or offering unsolicited advice. He brought his children to visit regularly, and I enjoyed being a grandmother again without feeling like I was being monitored for signs of cognitive decline. My relationships with Sandra and Patricia remained strained. They seemed unable to fully accept that they had been wrong, unable to move past their resentment about the inheritance, unable to build a relationship with me that wasn't somehow connected to money. But I was okay with that. I had learned that I couldn't control other people's choices, only my own responses to them. I had chosen to preserve my dignity and autonomy, and if that meant having a smaller family, it was a price I was willing to pay. The foundation flourished. Within a year, we had helped launch 15 new businesses and supported the expansion of 12 existing ones. Women from across the region were applying for grants, and I found myself becoming something of a mentor and role model for female entrepreneurs. Mrs. Sullivan, Maria Gonzalez said during one of our quarterly grant recipient gatherings, "You changed my life. Not just with the money, but with the example you set. You showed me that it's never too late to take control of your own destiny." These were the words that mattered to me now. Not the resentment of children who had seen me as a bank account, but the gratitude of women who saw me as an inspiration. One evening, almost 2 years after the family crisis had begun, I was reviewing grant applications when my phone rang. It was Michael, Sandra's son, now 27, and engaged to a lovely young woman named Sarah. "Grandma, I have something to ask you." "What's that, sweetheart?" "Sarah and I are getting married next spring, and we'd love to have you at the wedding." "But, Grandma, I need to know that it's not going to be awkward with Mom in the family situation." Thought about Michael's request. I had missed his college graduation because of the ongoing family tension. I had missed Patricia's daughter's high school graduation for the same reason. I had chosen my dignity over family events, but at what cost? "Michael, I would love to come to your wedding." "Really, even with everything that's happened?" "Michael, your mother and I may have our differences, but you're my grandson and I love you. I wouldn't miss your wedding for the world." "That means everything to me, Grandma." "And Grandma?" "I think Mom is finally starting to understand that she was wrong about everything. She's been talking about you differently lately." "How so?" "She talks about how successful the foundation is, how much good you're doing, how impressive it is that you built something so meaningful. She seems proud of you." "That's nice to hear." "Grandma, do you think there's any chance you and Mom could work things out?" I considered the question carefully. Did I want to work things out with Sandra? Did I miss having my daughter in my life? The answer was complicated. "Michael, I'm open to rebuilding a relationship with your mother if she's genuinely ready to respect my autonomy and accept my decisions. But it would have to be a relationship between equals, not between a mother and a child who thinks she needs supervision." I think she's getting there. The wedding was beautiful. Michael and Sarah exchanged vows in a garden ceremony that reminded me of my own wedding 45 years earlier. I sat in the front row, wearing a gorgeous blue dress I had bought specifically for the occasion, feeling proud and happy and grateful to be included. During the reception, Sandra approached me hesitantly. "Mom, you look beautiful." "Thank you. It's a lovely wedding." "Mom, can we talk? Privately?" We walked to a quiet corner of the garden, away from the music and laughter of the celebration. "Mom, I owe you an apology. A real one this time." I waited. "I've been watching you over the past 2 years. I've seen what you've built with the foundation. How you've helped other women. How you've created something meaningful and lasting with your money. Go on." I realized that everything we were afraid you would do with your money, waste it, lose it, spend it foolishly, you've actually done the opposite. You've used it wisely and generously to make a real difference in the world. Sandra, let me finish, please. I also realized that we never gave you credit for being the intelligent, capable woman you've always been. We treated you like you suddenly became incompetent at 73, when the truth is, you've been making smart decisions your entire life. Sandra's eyes filled with tears. "Mom, I was wrong. Not just about the spending, not just about the conservatorship research, but about the fundamental assumption that we knew better than you did about your own life. What changed your mind? Watching you thrive. Watching you build something meaningful. Watching you live independently and successfully and happily. Everything we said you couldn't do, you've done brilliantly. I felt a familiar stirring of emotion, the love I had always felt for my daughter mixing with the pain she had caused me. Sandra, I appreciate the apology, but what do you want from me now? I want to be your daughter again, not your monitor, not your financial advisor, not your caretaker. Just your daughter who loves you and respects you and wants to be part of your life. The will doesn't change. I know. And I understand why it can't. Mom, you protected yourself the only way you could, and you were right to do it. You're really okay with that? I'm proud of it. I'm proud that my mother is strong enough to stand up for herself, smart enough to protect her own interests, and generous enough to use her wealth to help other people. We stood in the garden, surrounded by the sounds of celebration, and I felt something shift between us. Not a return to the way things had been, that was impossible, but perhaps the beginning of something new and better. Sandra, if we're going to rebuild our relationship, there have to be ground rules. Name them. Complete respect for my autonomy. No questions about my spending, my decisions, my lifestyle choices. No suggestions about what I should do or how I should live. Agreed. No discussions about inheritance, wills, or what might happen to my money when I die. Agreed. And no treating me like I'm fragile or incompetent or in need of protection from my own choices. Agreed. I looked at my daughter, this woman I had raised with such hopes and dreams, and saw something I hadn't seen in years. Genuine respect. Then maybe we can try again. The reconciliation with Sandra was slow, but steady. She proved her sincerity through consistent behavior, never questioning my choices, never offering unsolicited advice, never treating me as anything other than a competent adult. Patricia eventually followed suit, though it took her longer to truly accept the new dynamic. By the time I turned 75, I had rebuilt relationships with all three of my children based on mutual respect rather than financial expectations. They had learned to love me for who I was, not what I might leave them, and I had learned that standing up for myself had ultimately strengthened our family bonds rather than destroying them. The Margaret Sullivan Foundation had become one of the most successful women's entrepreneurship programs in the region. We had helped launch over 50 businesses and supported the growth of dozens more. I had discovered a sense of purpose and accomplishment that had nothing to do with being someone's mother or grandmother, and everything to do with being Margaret. One evening, as I sat in my study reviewing the latest round of grant applications, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this point. 2.5 years ago, my children had thought I was losing my mind because I had decided to spend my own money on my own happiness. They had tried to control me, monitor me, and even researched ways to legally strip me of my autonomy. But in fighting for my independence, I had discovered something more valuable than money: self-respect. I had learned that love without respect is insufficient, that family relationships must be based on equality rather than control, and that it's never too late to stand up for yourself. The money I had given away had been replaced by something far more precious: a sense of purpose, meaningful work, and relationships based on genuine affection rather than financial expectation. My children had learned to value me as a person, and I had learned to value myself. I picked up my phone and called David. "Hi, Mom, how are you?" "I'm wonderful, sweetheart. Are you free for dinner tomorrow? I'm making pot roast." "I'd love that. Should I bring anything?" "Just yourself." "And David?" "Bring Angela and the kids. It's time for a family dinner." As I hung up the phone, I smiled. I had started this journey as a woman whose family thought she was losing her mind, but I had discovered that the only thing I had lost was my willingness to be controlled, and that was the best loss of my life. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.